All right, so is economics driving all major change in India? That seems to be one of the central arguments made by Patrick French in his new book on India. Pleasure to have you on the program, Patrick. Firstly, you call it an intimate biography of 1.2 billion people. How intimate can you get with such a mass of people?
Well, I think that when you're looking at very large, long-term historical change, you can't only tell it through the philosophy of politics and the data of economics. You have to, in a way, focus on individuals, whether it's a man who spent 2 years chained up in a quarry near Mysore, or whether it's somebody who's been at the forefront of the telecom revolution and is now worth $8 billion US. So it's by focusing on individuals and their stories that I try and tell a larger national narrative.
And you argue right in the beginning, and you use this phrase and you say that India could well be the default setting for the world's future. And you arrive here at a time when the national mood is not that. It's not that self-confident, we've arrived country, which was, by the way, at least the middle-class mood a few months ago.
Well, I don't know if moods really change that fast, depending on whether President Obama is on Indian soil or not. But I think that a lot of things that you take for granted in India are unfamiliar in the rest of the world. So probably here you would have in the office people who speak perhaps Bengali or Tamil or Hindi as their first language. Other people speak English. There may be all sorts of other languages. They'll come from different communities, different parts of the country. They'll have very different cultural backgrounds. And in most societies that is not familiar, but it is becoming increasingly familiar.
Now,
and I think, you know, for example, when I grew up in a small town in southern England, every single person was sort of Christian and white. Whereas in London today, about 25% of the population originates from outside the UK. So the sort of diversity that you have all the time in India is only beginning to come to other countries. And possibly there are lessons in how to deal with that that can be learnt by the rest of the world from India.
You divide your book into these three broad sort of prisms through which you look at the country. Rashtra, the evolution of the nation; Lakshmi, the creation of wealth in the post-liberalization India; and Samaj, the society and changes that are being impacted by this change. Do you believe, and did you find, because you do make this argument, that economics today is driving all other changes in a sense?
Well, I think if you look immediately after 1947, when the founding parents, the people who wrote the Constitution, were trying to work out what kind of a nation to have. Should you have a prime ministerial system? Should you have a universal democracy? Politics was hugely important, and that ran right through, I'd say, until the 1970s or 80s. But after the liberalisation of the early 90s, it's economics which is driving everything. And a lot of the social change of the last decade, for example, children being able to do things their parents could never have done, whether socially or in terms of the job they would aspire to, all of that is coming out of economic change.
Alec Padamsee, there's a cultural shift in India that can perhaps only be spotted by those who did witness India before liberalization. I often describe myself as the last generation that was formed in the pre-liberalization years of India, and we look back even with Doordarshan and Salma Sultan with the rose in her hair and the Nirma washing powder and Gold Spot, the zinc thing. I mean, I'm borrowing from your world to define a certain kind of simplicity that seems to have gone. Patrick argues in his book that no matter how many influences of globalization, there remains something quintessentially Indian about us. But every time I step into a mall, I have to tell you I don't feel that.
Absolutely right. I think what Patrick is, he's right, but also I think he needs to take into consideration that India is one of the few countries in the world, and this was said by a Frenchman years and years and years ago at the time of independence, where the centuries coexist. In every other country, the century knocks out the last century, but here we have the 18th century, the 19th century, the 20th century, and now the 21st century. And so in that sense, yes, everything is true, because you can find an Indian who says, I'm still in slave labor, you know, I'm in bonded labor. But bonded labor was abolished with the going out of the British. So everything in India is true and false. If you're in the India of the 21st century, everything that is happening in the 18th century is impossible. I mean, our constitution won't allow it, but it is.
But do you believe
dowry marriages? I mean, that was outlawed I don't know how many years ago.